Commander Valera stood tall in the briefing room, her scales gleaming under the bright lights. She was a Draxian, and like all her kind, she was strong. Her muscles could bend steel, her claws could tear through armor. She looked at the gathered aliens around the table and felt proud. The pirate attacks are increasing, she said, her voice sharp. But my forces will handle them. We need real warriors for this job. Hewen sat quietly in the corner, taking notes on her tablet. She was human, young, with dark hair tied back simply. She worked for Earth's diplomatic team, but most people didn't know she had been in the military before. She preferred it that way. What about the human security teams? Someone asked. Earth has offered help. Valera laughed, a hissing sound that filled the room. Humans, please. I have seen the data. They are weak compared to real warriors. A Draxian soldier is 3 times stronger. Velkin is twice as fast. Even the Kroths have natural armor that humans lack. She pulled up images on the screen, pictures of human soldiers next to alien warriors. The difference was clear. Humans look small, soft, breakable. Every species has myths about their warriors. Valera continued. Humans tell stories about soldiers who never give up, who fight against impossible odds. Very inspiring, very dramatic, but myths are just stories. Reality is different. A few aliens nodded in agreement. Others looked uncertain. Hewen raised her hand slowly. Commander, if I may. Yes. Valor turned to her, one eye ridge raised. Human warriors do have certain advantages. Not physical ones, but what? Volley interrupted. Better weapons. We all have access to the same technology. Better training. My soldiers trained since childhood. Better strategy. Please enlighten me. Hewen met her eyes calmly. Experience in difficult situations. Adaptability under pressure. Determination wins. Determination. Valor laughed again. Another word for stubbornness. That doesn't win battles. Strength wins battles. Speed wins battle. Superior firepower wins battles. She walked to the center of the room and picked up a steel bar from the demonstration table. With barely any effort, she bent it into a U-shape. Metal groaned under her grip. This is real strength, she said, dropping the twisted bar on the table with a loud clang. Can any human do this? No. This is why we Draxians lead military operations. This is why your myths remain myths. The room was silent. No one argued. Near the back, a man in a simple merchant's uniform watched quietly. His name was Tessa, and he was listed as a trader representative. He had come to discuss supply routes. His ship carried goods between stations. Nothing special, or so it seemed. Taong caught Hwan's eye and smiled slightly. It was a small smile, sad and knowing. She returned it with the tiniest nod. They both understood something that Valeria didn't, something that couldn't be shown with bent metal or impressive muscles, something that could only be proven one way. The pirate raids are centered here, Valera said, pointing at a star map. The Ravager clans. They have been attacking merchant ships, stealing cargo, taking hostages. 12 different species have lost vessels. It ends now. How many ships do the pirates have? Another officer asked. Intelligence says about 20 vessels. My force has 30 warships. We have superior numbers and superior warriors. This will be quick. And if intelligence is wrong? Hwan asked quietly. Volley turned to her, annoyed. Intelligence is rarely wrong. But even if they have more ships, it Doesn't matter, quality beats quantity. One Draxian warrior is worth 5. Pirates, of course, Commander Hwan said, returning to her notes. Briefing continued for another hour. Plans were made, routes were discussed. Valor's confidence never wavered. She had fought pirates before, she had won. Every time. This would be no different. As the meeting ended, Taeyong approached. Haewon in the hallway, she doesn't know. He said simply. No, Haewon agreed. She doesn't. Should we warn her? Haewon shook her head. She wouldn't listen. She needs to see it herself. A lot of people might die before she learns. I know. Haewon's voice was heavy, but some lessons can't be taught, they have to be lived. Taeyang nodded slowly. He had been a merchant for 5 years now. Before that, he had been other things, things he didn't talk about, things that left scars inside that no one could see. Your ship is joining the convoy, Owan asked. Yes, the Morning Star. We're carrying medical supplies and other things. Taeyong smiled that sad smile again. Just medical supplies, but my ship has good shields, very good shields. Better than most merchant vessels need. I see. They both knew what was coming. The pirates were more dangerous than Valera believed. Intelligence was wrong, just as Hwan suspected, and when the attack came, strength and scales wouldn't be enough. The myths Valera mocked were about to become very real. The convoy moved through space like a slow river. 15 merchant ships traveled together, protected by Valera's 30 warships. Draxian commander had positioned her strongest vessels at the front, ready to meet any threat with overwhelming force. Taesung sat in the captain's chair of the Morning Star, watching the peaceful stars. His ship was in the middle of the convoy, surrounded by other merchants. A Velkin cargo hauler to his left, across transport to his right, and behind him Jinho's engineering vessel carrying equipment and supplies. All quiet, said his co-pilot, checking the sensors. No signs of trouble, Taeyang replied, his eyes never leaving the view screen. 3 ships ahead. Hwan stood on the bridge of a diplomatic vessel, monitoring communications. She listened to Valera's constant updates. The commander sounded pleased with herself, maintaining formation. Valera announced, all ships report normal status. The pirates would be foolish to attack this force, Hwan said. Nothing but her hands moved across her console, checking systems that diplomats normally didn't worry about. Weapon ranges, shield frequencies, escape vectors. On Jinho's cargo ship, the engineer was doing the same thing. He was a quiet man, older than most of the crew. His ship was old too, ugly and slow, but the engines were perfect. He had made sure of that. Captain Bria too. All ships, the convoy leader announced. We're entering the asteroid field. Stay in formation, keep your shields up. This is where the attacks have happened before. The merchant ships moved closer. Together, the warships spread out slightly, ready to respond from multiple angles. Everything was according to plan. Valera reviewed her tactical display. 30 warships, 15 merchants. Enough firepower to destroy a small moon. No pirate force would dare attack. She was wrong. They came from everywhere at once, behind asteroids, above, below, from all sides. Not 20 ships, 60, 70. Maybe more. The sensors couldn't count them all fast enough. Raiders, someone shouted. Multiple contacts there. Everywhere, the peaceful convoy exploded into chaos. Laser fire filled the space. Missiles launched, ships scattered in Panic, Valera's warship shook as enemy. Fire hit the shields, return fire, all. Ships engage, but the pirates knew what they were doing. They had studied Draxian tactics. They knew Valera would put her strongest ships at the front, so they attacked from behind and the sides, hitting the merchants first. A Vulcan cargo ship exploded in flames. Its crew never had time to call for help. All warships protect the convoy. Volley ordered, but her ships were out of position. The pirates were too fast too. Many. Hwan watched her scream in horror. 6 escort ships gone in the first minute. 4 merchant vessels already boarded and more raiders coming. We need to organize a defense, she said into her calm. If we coordinate, human ships stay off this channel. Valera snapped. Military traffic only. On the morning star, alarms blared. 3 pirate ships were heading straight for them. Captain, the co-pilot asked, his voice tight with fear. Tiang didn't answer immediately. He watched the raiders approach, calculated their speed, their weapons, their formation. Then he pressed a button on his chair. Jinho, you there? I'm here, the engineer's calm voice replied. You see them? I see them. Good. Get ready. Across the convoy, Valera was screaming orders. Her beautiful battle plan was falling apart. The pirates weren't fighting like pirates. They were fighting like soldiers, coordinated, brutal, efficient. All ships scatter. She finally ordered every vessel for themselves, break formation and run. It was the worst order she could have given. Now the merchants were alone, unprotected, easy targets. A Croth transport tried to flee. 2 pirate ships caught it and tore it apart. Jinho's cargo hauler was next in line. The raiders closed in, ready to board. Then something strange happened. The ugly old cargo ship turned, not away from the pirates, toward them. What is that fool doing? Valera shouted on Taeon's ship. Panels slid open along the hull. Hidden weapons extended. The peaceful merchant vessel suddenly looked very different. Yunwoo, Taeong said quietly. Ready, Captain, replied a voice from the weapons station. A man who had been silent until now. A man who moved with the precision of someone who had done this before. The first pirate ship fired. Morning Star shields flared but held. Strong shields, military shields, shields that no merchant ship should have. Fire, Taeyong said. Rail guns roared. The pirate ship shields collapsed instantly. The raider tried to turn away, but Hewen's calculations were already on Taeon's screen. She had sent them the instant Valera cut her off. Merchant ships weren't helpless after all, at least not the human ones. Second ship incoming, Hyan Wu reported. I see it. More weapons fire. The Morning Star shook hard. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, but Taeyong's hands never left the controls. He flew the ship like it was part of his body, dodging, weaving, always moving. Jinho's cargo hauler moved alongside them. Its bay doors open, not to surrender, not to be boarded. People in space suits jumped out. 12 humans carrying weapons and boarding equipment. They used the debris for cover, moving with frightening purpose toward the nearest raider. Valera watched from her damaged flagship, unable to believe what she was seeing. They're insane, she whispered. That's not tactics, that's suicide. But the human ships weren't running. They were fighting against impossible odds, against superior numbers. They were fighting, and somehow, impossibly, they weren't losing yet. The Morning Star was dying. Smoke filled the corridors. Alarm screamed warnings. Hull breaches on 3 decks. life support failing. Any reasonable crew would have abandoned ship by now, but Tong's crew kept working, shield generators offline. Haiyan Wu reported, his voice steady despite the sparks raining down on his console, switching to backup power. Weapons at 40% added another crew member. Good enough, Tieson said. His left arm hung useless, broken when a console exploded. He piloted with one hand, his face pale with pain but his eyes clear. In the medical bay, Sua worked on a wounded engineer. The room had lost pressure 5 minutes ago. She wore a void suit, now operating in vacuum. Her hands moved with absolute precision, closing wounds, stopping bleeding, saving lives, and she sang softly, so softly that only her suit radio carried it to her patient, an old Korean lullaby her grandmother had taught her. The words were about stars and home and peace, strange things to sing while surrounded by death and war. But it helped. The wounded man's breathing steadied, his panic faded. If their medic could sing while operating in space, maybe they would be okay. On the bridge, Haewon sat at the tactical station she had transferred over from the diplomatic ship the moment the fighting started. No one had questioned it. They needed her. Numbers flowed across her screen, enemy positions, weapon ranges, trajectory calculations. Her mind worked like a computer, seeing patterns, predicting movements, finding weaknesses. 2 more raiders approaching from above. She announced, "I see them." Taesung replied, "If we rotate 17 degrees and fire at my mark, we can hit both with one shot. Do it." Hwang counted down. 3, 2, 1 mark. Haiyan Wu fired. The shot was impossible. Threading through a gap in the debris field, it struck the first raider's engine, which exploded and sent the ship careening into the second raider. Both vessels spiraled away, crippled. Val watched from her command deck. Her tactical officer had just calculated the odds of that shot, 1 in 3,000. No one was that lucky. They're not lucky, she said slowly, understanding finally. They're just that good. Near Jinho's cargo hauler, the boarding team had reached their target. Daewon led them. Grim man with scars that told of old battles. He placed charges on the raiders' hull with practiced ease. Blow it, he ordered. The charges cut through. The team entered fast, weapons ready. The pirates inside weren't expecting boarders. They thought they were hunting prey. They were wrong. 6 minutes later, the raiders' engines exploded from the inside. Daewon and his team were already jumping back to their ship, using magnetic lines to pull themselves through space. "One down," Jinho said calmly from his bridge. "Who's next?" His cargo hauler had no weapons at all, but it didn't need them. Sometimes the best weapon was people willing to do impossible things. Another human ship moved into position, a small transport carrying families, civilians, people who should have been running, hiding, praying to survive. Instead, they rammed a pirate vessel. It wasn't a suicide run. The pilot was Uni, a woman who had served in the Navy years ago. She knew exactly where to hit, exactly how hard, exactly what angle would disable the raider while minimizing damage to her own ship. Metal screamed. Both vessels shook violently, but when they separated, the raiders' engines were dead and the transport was still moving. "Transport ship, what are you doing?" Valor demanded over the comm. "You have civilians aboard." "Yes, Commander." Unbai replied calmly, "which is why we can't Let the pirates reach them, my children are on this ship, I'll die before I let raiders take them. Simple words, no drama, just fact. Vaylor looked at her. Tactical display, 3 raider ships. Destroyed, 2 disabled, 5 more fleeing, and it was the human ships doing it. Her Draxian warships were rallying now, reforming, finally getting into position to help. But the humans had held the line when it mattered most. On the Morning Star, another explosion rocked the ship. The main reactor was overloading. We need to evacuate, someone said. No, Tong replied. If we lose the reactor, we lose the ship. If we lose the ship, the transport is exposed. Keep working, Captain. We're dead if that reactor blows. We're dead if we stop fighting, so we don't stop. Sua's voice came over the comm, still singing that soft lullaby. 3 more wounded had made it to medical. She treated them all while pieces of her ship floated past the open walls. H-Wan's console sparked and died. She switched to a backup, then that one failed too. She pulled out a portable tablet and kept calculating, kept finding targets, kept guiding their shots. Yan Wu and LT Unk and GTS weapon station was on fire. He put it out with one hand and fired with the other. No one stopped, no one slowed down, no one surrendered. This was what human warriors were. Not the strongest, not the fastest, not the toughest, but absolutely, completely, terrifyingly unwilling to quit. A 4th raider exploded. Day 1's team had boarded another one. A 5th turned and fled, engines burning hot as it ran from a fight it should have won easily. Tide was turning. The raiders had come expecting easy prey. They found something else instead. They found humans who had learned long ago that sometimes the only way to survive was to refuse to die, and no amount of physical strength could fight that. Valira finally understood what H-Wan had tried to tell her in the briefing room. Human warriors weren't myths, they were real. But their strength wasn't in their bodies, it was in something deeper. Something that couldn't be measured or weighed or compared on a chart. It was the choice to keep fighting when everything said to stop, the decision to stand when falling was easier, the refusal to accept defeat even when defeat seemed certain. The Morning Star hung in space, barely functional, trailing atmosphere and debris, but its guns were still firing, still fighting. That was the human way. The battle was over. The raiders had fled or been destroyed. Volley warships secured the area, but everyone knew the truth. The Draxian forces hadn't won this fight. They had survived it because of the humans. Rescue ships arrived within the hour. Medical teams rushed to the damaged vessels. The Morning Star was a priority. Sensors showed it should have broken apart already, yet somehow it was still intact. When the rescue team entered, they found the crew at their stations, still ready, still alert, still prepared to fight if needed. Tiang was unconscious now, finally allowing his body to rest. His co-pilot had taken over, keeping the ship stable with shaking hands. The young man looked like he hadn't slept in days, which was probably true. Sua was still in medical bay, still wearing her void suit, still treating wounded. She had been working in vacuum for over 2 hours. When the rescue team tried to relieve her, she waved them off. I know these patients, she said simply. Let me finish. Hewan sat at her dead console, tablet in hand, still recording data. Her face was covered in soot and small cuts. She looked up when they Rescue team entered and smiled tiredly. Good timing, she said. We were running out of ammunition. It was a joke, probably, the rescue leader wasn't sure. Valera arrived on the Morning Star an hour later. She walked through the damaged corridors, seeing the destruction, trying to understand how anyone had survived this. She found Sua in what was left of the medical bay. The human medic had finally removed her helmet. Her face was exhausted but peaceful. You were singing, Valera said. Yes, why? Sua looked at her with kind eyes. Because my patients needed to hear something besides explosions and alarms. Because fear makes wounds hurt more. Because someone had to stay calm, so I did. But you were afraid. Of course I was afraid. Sua smiled softly. I'm not brave, Commander. I'm just a medic doing my job. The fear doesn't matter. The job does. Valeria thought about that. In Draxian culture, warriors were supposed to be fearless. Fear was weakness. Strength meant no fear, but these humans were terrified. She had heard it in their voices, seen it in their eyes. They were scared the entire time. They fought anyway. That was something new. Something her people didn't understand. On Jinho's cargo hauler, Valeria met with Day One's boarding team. They were laughing, actually laughing despite their injuries. One man had a broken leg, another had burns across his arm. All of them looked half dead, but they were celebrating, sharing stories about the fight, joking about the close calls. You could have died, Valeria said. Yes, Duan agreed cheerfully. Many times, but we didn't. You boarded enemy ships with hand weapons. You cut through their holes. That's insane. Maybe, he shrugged, but it worked. Why did you do it? Day One's smile faded. He looked serious now. Because those raiders were going to hurt people, kill them, take them, and we could stop that. So we did. It's not complicated, Commander. You could have run, sure, and the pirates would have chased someone else. Someone weaker, someone with children on board. He shook his head. That's not acceptable. Valor wanted to argue. Wanted to say that survival was more important than heroics. Wanted to explain that good tactics meant preserving your own forces, but she couldn't because the humans had won. Against terrible odds, they had won. Later, Valera attended a gathering in one of the larger ships. Survivors from all the vessels came together. They shared food, stories, grief for the lost. She found herself sitting next to Dr. Sang-min, a human scholar who had been traveling with the convoy. He was old, gentle, more comfortable with books than battles. You want to understand us, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, may I show you something? He pulled up a display on his tablet. Images began to flow, old images. Historical records from Earth. This is Korea, Sang-min said. My homeland. For thousands of years, we were invaded. Japan, China, Mongolia. Empires that wanted to erase us, make us disappear. The images showed war, occupation, people suffering, but we didn't disappear. Sang-min continued. We endured even when it seemed impossible. We survived. Our language, our culture, our people. We learned that surrender doesn't mean safety. Sometimes the only choice is to resist, to fight, to refuse, to die. More images, different wars now. Different enemies, but always the same story. People facing overwhelming force and choosing to stand. Every human culture has this. Sun said. Different names, different stories, same truth. We learned to endure because we had to. Our planet was harsh. Our history was violent. We evolved to persist too. Continue to survive, he showed her. More human soldiers in ancient times, fighting with primitive weapons, modern soldiers using advanced technology, always outnumbered, always struggling, always refusing to quit. You asked why. We fight this way, Sang Min said. This is why, because our ancestors who gave up didn't survive to have children. Because our cultures that surrendered disappeared because over thousands of years we learned that the only way forward is through. Valeria absorbed this slowly. She thought about her own people. The Draxians were strong. They had evolved as apex predators. They didn't need to learn endurance because they were always the strongest thing around. Humans were different. They were prey that became predators, weak things that learned to survive by refusing to die. Huan joined them, limping slightly. She carried a cup of tea and sat down. Carefully, the council is calling for an inquiry, she said, about the battle, about why our merchant ships had weapons, about our tactics. What will you tell them? Valor asked. Truth. Huan sipped her tea. That we did what we had to do, that we protected ourselves and others, that we make no apologies for surviving. Some will say you were reckless, that you should have run. Let them say it. Huan's voice was soft but firm. They weren't there. They didn't have to choose between probable death and certain death. We did, and we chose to fight. She looked at Valera directly. You called our warrior myth stories. You were wrong. They're not myths, they're memories. Every human carries them. The memory of ancestors who faced impossible odds and survived, who chose pain over surrender, who taught us that giving up feels worse than dying. Valera had no response to that. What could she say? She had seen it herself, the humans fighting in their dying ships, Sua singing in vacuum, Tong piloting with broken bones, Day one boarding enemy vessels. Against all logic, they weren't myths, they were real, and Valera finally understood what that meant. The Galactic Council chamber was enormous, designed to hold representatives from hundreds of species. Today it was full. Everyone wanted to hear about the battle, about how humans had done the impossible. Valera stood at the speaker's platform, feeling small. Despite her size, council members watched her from their seats. Some looked curious, others looked angry. Many looked afraid. Admiral Krenth, a high-ranking council officer, had reviewed all the battle data. He spoke. First, the engagement should have been a disaster, he said, pulling up tactical displays. The convoy was outnumbered 3-1, outgunned, caught by surprise. Our simulations show a 98% chance of total loss. He paused, letting that sink in. Instead, the convoy survived with minimal casualties. How? Because 5 human vessels fought in ways that our tactical computers cannot predict. They made decisions that no rational being should make, and somehow those decisions worked. Murmurs filled the chamber. Some species were impressed, others were disturbed. Velcan representative stood. Commander Valera, you were in charge of convoy security. Why did human merchant ships have military weapons? That violates trade agreements. Before Valera could answer, Ambassador Eugene rose from the human section. She was an older woman, calm and dignified. Those weapons saved lives, Eugene said firmly, including non-human lives. Should we apologize for being prepared? You hid military capability, the Vulcan accused. You deceived us. We protected ourselves. Eugene replied, as any species would. Question why we had weapons, the question is why we needed to use them. Where was the council's protection? That caused an uproar. Representatives shouted at each other, some defended the humans, others demanded explanations. Admiral Krenth called for order. The council will investigate security failures separately. Right now we're here to understand what happened. Commander Volley, you witnessed the battle. Firsthand, tell us what you saw. Valera stepped forward. This was the moment. She could criticize human tactics as reckless. She could focus on the treaty violations. She could protect her own reputation by blaming others, but that would be a lie. I called human warriors myths. Valera began, her voice clear and strong. I said their stories were just propaganda. I was wrong. The chamber went silent. I watched a human merchant ship hold position against 3 raiders while its hull was breaching. I watched a medic perform surgery in vacuum for 2 hours. I watched a civilian transport with families aboard ram a pirate vessel to save others. She pulled up footage from the battle. The council members watched Sua singing while operating, Taeyong piloting with a broken arm, Twan's team boarding enemy ships with nothing but hand weapons. These are not fearless heroes, Valera continued. They were terrified. I could hear it in their voices, see it in how their hands shook. They knew they were probably going to die. She paused, meeting the eyes of different representatives. But they fought anyway, not because they were strong like Draxians, not because they were fast like Vulcans. They fought because they refused to accept defeat. Because someone had to stand, so they stood. More footage. The Morning Star, barely functional, still firing its weapons. Jinho's cargo hauler moving to protect others despite having no defenses. Hum's calculated ram that saved dozens of lives. Human warriors aren't myths, Valera said. They're real. But their strength isn't what I thought. It's not physical power. It's something else, something I didn't understand until I saw it myself. Ambassador Eugene stood again. May I speak, Admiral? Krenth nodded. Eugene walked to the center of the chamber, moving slowly, carrying herself with dignity. Every species here has stories about heroes, she began, gods and legends who never lose, never fear, never struggle. Those are myths. That's not what we are. She gestured to the footage still playing on the screens. Our stories are about ordinary people doing impossible things. Not because they wanted to, because they had to, because the alternative was worse. Dr. Sang-min joined her, carrying his tablet. May I provide context? Krenth nodded again. Sang-min displayed images from human history, ancient battles, modern wars, disasters, and survivals. Humans evolved as persistence hunters, he explained. We're not fast, but we can run for days. We're not strong, but we never stop. Our psychology rewards endurance. Our culture celebrates those who refuse to quit. He showed more images. Korean resistance fighters, soldiers holding impossible positions, crews staying with damaged ships. Always the same pattern. People who should have lost but didn't. This isn't unique to one human culture. Sang-min continued. Every nation, every people, every group has learned the same lesson. When you can't win with strength, you win with persistence. When you can't win with speed, you win with determination. A Kroth representative spoke up. But at what cost? Your people take terrible wounds. Many die. Is this Wise, Hay stood now, her injuries still. Visible is survival, wise is protecting. Others wise, we don't fight this way. Because it's easy, we fight this way. Because it works, you could have retreated, another species suggested, and let the pirates chase someone. Weaker, Hay shook her head. No, that's not acceptable. If we can stand, we stand. If we can fight, we fight. Not for glory, not for pride, because someone has to. Tiang entered the chamber then, his arm in a cast, looking tired but alive. Sua was with him, so was Jinho and Duan and others from the battle. They didn't speak, they just stood there, living proof of what humans were. Valera looked at them and spoke again. I've been a warrior my entire life. I trained since childhood. I'm stronger than any human will ever be. I thought that made me superior. She gestured at the human crew members. But these people taught me something. Strength isn't just physical. It's not about muscles or claws or armor. Real strength is choosing to stand when everything says to fall. It's continuing when stopping would be easier. It's refusing to quit even when quitting makes sense. She looked directly at the council members. The humans didn't survive that battle because they're the best warriors. They survived because they wouldn't accept death, because giving up isn't in them, because somewhere deep in their history and culture and evolution, they learned that the only way forward is through. The chamber was absolutely silent now. You want to know if human warrior stories are myths? Valor asked. They're not. The myths are that warriors have to be strong or fast or armored. The truth is simpler. Warriors are those who fight, and humans never stop fighting. Ambassador Eugene smiled slightly. Commander Valera understands now what we tried to explain before. Our strength isn't that we're the best, it's that we're too stubborn to lose. Admiral Kranth stood. This council owes the human convoy members a debt. You saved not just yourselves but many others. Your actions will be recognized. We don't need recognition, Taong said quietly. We just need to not be called liars when we tell you what we are. And everyone knew what he meant. The myths were real, always had been. Humans had just proven it. 3 months after the battle, Valera stood in a different kind of room, not a war room or a council chamber, a training facility. Around her, young Draxian warriors practiced combat techniques. They were strong as all Draxians were, fast, deadly, but Valera watched them with different eyes. Now she saw their confidence, their belief that strength alone was enough. She had believed that once too. Commander and aide approached. The human instructors have arrived. Valor nodded and went to meet them. Haiyan Wu stood in the reception area, looking around with interest. He was alone, dressed simply, carrying only a small bag. He didn't look like much. No impressive muscles, no battle scars visible, just a quiet man with calm eyes. Thank you for coming, Valor said. Thank you for asking. Hanu bowed slightly, a human gesture of respect. I wasn't sure if you would. I wasn't sure either, but after the battle, I realized my people need to learn what yours know. And what's that? How to keep fighting when you should stop, how to endure when endurance seems impossible, how to turn stubbornness into a weapon. Haiyan Wu smiled. That's good start, but it's not about stubbornness, it's about understanding why you fight. He followed Valera to the training area. The young Draxians stopped their exercises to stare at the human. Some looked curious, others looked dismissive. One warrior muttered Something about myths, show them. Valor said simply. Hyun Woo set down his bag and stepped into the practice ring. A young Draxian volunteered immediately, eager to prove himself against a human. The match lasted 3 seconds. The Draxian rushed forward, using his superior strength and speed. Hyun Woo didn't try to match either. Instead, he moved aside, used the Draxian's momentum against him, and put the warrior on the ground with barely any effort. Again the Draxian growled, embarrassed. They fought again. Same result. The Draxian kept getting faster, stronger, more aggressive. Hyun Woo stayed calm, patient, always one step ahead. After the 5th time, the young warrior stayed down, breathing hard. How, he asked. You're fighting with your body, Hyun Woo said, helping him up. I'm fighting with my mind. You're faster and stronger, yes, but you're also predictable. You rely on those advantages. When they're not enough, you have nothing else. He addressed all the watching warriors. Human combat training isn't about being the strongest. It's about adapting, persisting, finding another way when the first way fails. It's about never running out of options, because you never run out of will. Over the next weeks, Hyun Woo taught them things that seemed wrong at first: how to keep fighting with injuries, how to work through pain and fear, how to make decisions when exhausted and terrified. Most importantly, he taught them why to keep going when every instinct said to stop. Your body will fail, he told them during one brutal training session. Your weapons will break, your plans will fall apart. These things happen. But if your spirit holds, you can endure anything. One evening, Valera found him sitting alone, looking tired. They're learning, she said. Some of them. Hyun Woo smiled slightly. Others think I'm trying to make them weak. They don't understand that acknowledging fear isn't weakness. It's wisdom. You were afraid during the battle, terrified. He said it simply, without shame. I thought we were all going to die, probably should have died. But being afraid doesn't mean you stop. It just means you understand the stakes. Valera sat beside him. Before the battle, I thought fear was something warriors conquered. Now I think maybe warriors just learn to work with it. That's right, fear is information. It tells you danger is real. The trick is using that information without letting it control you. Across the galaxy, other changes were happening. On a space station near the frontier, Jinho and Daewon opened a security company. They train mixed species teams in human style tactics, not about strength, about persistence, about creative problem solving, about never giving up. Their first clients were cargo haulers tired of being easy targets. Within weeks, pirate attacks in that sector dropped by 60%, not because the haulers fought better, because they fought smarter, and the pirates learned to avoid them. Sua traveled to different worlds teaching alien medical teams. Her lessons weren't just about medicine, they were about staying calm under pressure, about working through fear, about singing lullabies in vacuum. Mikan isn't just science, she told a class of Velkin doctors. It's about giving patients hope. Sometimes hope matters more than drugs, and you can't give hope if you're panicking yourself. T returned to his merchant roots, but now other ships requested to travel with him. His reputation had spread. The captain who never ran, the merchant who fought back. Just having him in a convoy made pirates think twice. He didn't like the attention, but he understood it. People need to believe someone will stand, he told during a visit. Not because we're heroes, because we're proof that standing is possible. Hewen had been promoted. She now led the human military liaison office, working with alien forces to share tactics and philosophy. The council wants us to teach more species, she told him. They're calling it the Galactic Endurance Corps, human instructors working with alien warriors, sharing what we learned from our history. That's good, Taeyong said, but they need to understand something. We're not teaching them to be human, we're teaching them to find their own persistence. Every species has it, they just forgot. Back at the training facility, a Draxian warrior approached Valira. She was young, strong, proud. Everything Valira had been before the battle. Commander, I don't understand. The warrior said, the human instructor makes us practice fighting while injured, while exhausted, while afraid. This isn't warrior training. Warriors should be strong. Valira considered her answer carefully. When I was your age, I thought the same thing. Then I watched a human medic operate in vacuum for 2 hours. I watched a merchant captain pilot with broken bones. I watched civilians ram pirate ships to protect strangers. She met the young warriors' eyes. They weren't strong like us, but they won anyway. Do you know why? The warrior shook her head. Because they understood something we forgot. Strength isn't just what your body can do, it's what your spirit refuses to accept. They refuse to accept defeat, refuse to accept surrender, refuse to quit. Valira gestured at the training grounds where Draxians were practicing human techniques. This training isn't making you weaker, it's teaching you that strength has many forms. Physical power is one, but endurance is another. Adaptation is another. The will to continue is the strongest of all. But we're Draxians, we're naturally strong. Yes, and that's been enough until now. But the galaxy is changing, the threats are changing. Physical strength alone isn't enough anymore. You need to learn what the humans learned, how to win when strength fails, how to survive when survival seems impossible, how to be the one still standing when everyone else has fallen. The young warrior thought about this. Is that what you learned from them? That and more, Valeria said. I learned that the myths were never about humans being the best warriors. The myths were about humans showing what any of us can be if we refuse to break. That's not human, that's universal. They just discovered it first. She looked out over the training grounds, watching her people learn endurance. Now, it's our turn to learn. 1 year after the battle, the galaxy looks different. Not in big obvious ways, the same species still flew the same ships, through the same stars, but something fundamental had changed. A shift in understanding that spread quietly from world to world on a human colony. The edge of known space, a ceremony was taking place. The Galactic Endurance Corps was officially being established. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to watch. Valira wore a new uniform now, not Draxian military colors, something different, a mix of styles from multiple species, united by a simple patch, a star that refused to fade even in darkness. She stood beside Heian Wu, who had agreed to serve as chief instructor. Around them were others who had learned what the humans knew, Draxians who had survived the training, Falcons who moved faster but also smarter, even a few Kroths whose natural armor was now backed by human determination. Admiral Krenth gave the opening speech. For too long, the galaxy measured warriors by Physical traits, strength, speed. Natural weapons, these things matter. Certainly, but they're not everything. The events of last year proved that. Beyond doubt, he gestured at the assembled soldiers. This corps represents something new, not human warriors, not Draxian warriors, but warriors who understand what the humans taught us. That endurance can defeat strength, that persistence can overcome speed, that the will to continue can win when everything else fails. Tong watched from the crowd standing with the other survivors. From the battle, his arm had healed, though it sometimes hurt on cold days. Sua stood beside him, still quiet, still kind. Jinho and Duan were there too, taking a break from their security company. Did you ever think it would get this big? Jinho asked quietly. No, Taeyong admitted. I just wanted to survive too. Protect others if I could. This, he gestured at the ceremony. This is bigger than us. Good, Sua said softly. Maybe now fewer people will die because they gave up too soon. The ceremony continued. Graduates of the first training program received their insignia. Draxians stood beside humans. Belpec. Different species united by a shared understanding. One young Draxian approached Valira. Afterward, she had been in the training program from the start. Her scales bore scars now earned through brutal practice sessions. Commander, I wanted to thank you, she said. Thank me for making you hurt. The young Draxian smiled. For showing me what I could be. Before this training, I thought being a warrior meant being strong. Now I know it means being unbreakable. Not my body, my spirit. Valeria felt something she hadn't felt in years. Pride, but different than before. Not pride in personal strength, pride in what could be taught, shared, passed on. You were already unbreakable, Valera said. You just didn't know it yet. That's what the training was for, not to make you something new, to show you what you already were. Across the colony, in a small lecture hall, Dr. Sangmin gave a presentation to mixed species students. He was older, now moving slowly, but his mind was sharp as ever. Human history is violent, he said, showing images from Earth. We fought each other for millennia. Terrible wars, horrible losses, but from that pain we learned lessons. He displayed an old Korean proverb in both human and alien scripts. This says, after bitter comes sweet. It means suffering isn't the end, it's what you learn from suffering that matters. We humans learn to endure because we had to, but that capacity exists in all thinking beings. A student asked, are humans the only species that can learn this? No, Sangmin said firmly. That's the point. What humans discovered, any species can learn. We're not special, we just had a specific history that taught us specific lessons. Now we share those lessons. He showed footage from the battle, then footage from recent incidents where other species had used human-style tactics to survive impossible situations. See, not humans doing this, other species. They learn to push through fear, to persist despite pain, to continue when logic said stop. The capacity was always there, they just needed to know it existed. In another part of the colony, Ambassador Eugene met with council officials. The conversation was about expansion, more training facilities, more instructors, more species learning. Endurance, some are concerned. One official said, they worry we're militarizing the entire galaxy, making everyone into soldiers. We're not making Soldiers, Eugene replied, we're teaching survival. There's a difference. A soldier learns to attack. We teach people to endure, to protect, to stand for others, but the techniques are the same. The techniques are tools. It's the philosophy that matters. We teach people to fight only when necessary, but when necessary to fight without quitting. That's not aggression. That's defense. The official looked unconvinced. Eugene continued, before humans joined the Galactic Council, how many merchant ships were lost to pirates? Annually, around 300, and last year 47. That's not because we're more aggressive, it's because prey that fights back isn't prey anymore. Pirates look for easy targets. Ships trained in endurance aren't easy, so the pirates go elsewhere or stop entirely. The official nodded slowly. Fewer victims because potential victims learn to persist. Exactly. On Earth, in a small apartment in Seoul, an old woman watched news about the Galactic Endurance Corps. She recognized one of the instructors, Hyan Wu. He had been her grandson's friend years ago. She smiled, remembering when he was young, always persistent, even as a child, never gave up on anything, no matter how hard. She had taught him in old saying, good gadgeting, until the end. Now he was teaching that same concept to aliens from across the galaxy. The words were different, the context was new, but the meaning was the same. Keep going, don't stop, endure. Her grandmother had taught her those words, her great-grandmother before that, passed down through generations, who had survived wars, occupations, hardships that should have broken them. But they hadn't broken, they endured. And now that endurance was spreading to the stars. Back at the colony, the ceremony ended. The graduates dispersed, returning to their duties across the galaxy. They would teach others who would teach others, spreading the lesson. Like seeds on the wind, Valera found Hwan in the crowd. The human diplomat looked tired but content. Your people changed everything, Valeria said. No, Hwan replied, we just reminded everyone what they already had. Every species has stories of endurance. Yours do, they all do. We just lived ours more recently. Still, thank you for what? For showing me that strength isn't what I thought, for teaching me that the myths were real, for proving that warriors aren't just born, they're forged. Hey. One smiled, you learned that yourself. We just gave you the circumstances to see it. The sun set over the colony, casting long shadows. Somewhere in the dark, Taeyong's merchant ship prepared for another supply run. Jinho and Duin planned their next security operation. Zua packed medical supplies for a frontier hospital. They weren't trying to be heroes, they were just living, working, continuing, doing what humans had always done, enduring. And across the galaxy, other species were learning to do the same. The myths had been real all along, not because humans were special, but because they had learned a truth that all beings could understand. That the strongest force in the universe isn't physical power, it's the choice to stand when falling is easier. The decision to continue when stopping makes sense. The refusal to accept defeat even when defeat seems certain. Cosmic grit, not human, universal. Valera stood watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky, each one a sun, each sun surrounded by worlds, each world filled with beings who were learning what humans had known for millennia. That persistence could move mountains, that determination could cross oceans, that the will to endure could outlast any storm. She had mocked the myths, once called them stories, propaganda, lies. Now she wore their symbol on her. Uniform taught their lessons to her. People carried their truth in her heart. The myths were real, always had been, and now finally the galaxy understood, not because humans were warriors, but because humans had shown what any being could become when they refused to break, when they chose persistence over surrender, when they decided that continuing was worth more than stopping. The galaxy had learned endurance, and it would never forget. In the darkness, the stars kept shining, distant, cold, uncaring, but beneath them, across countless worlds, beings of every species stood watch, ready to fight if needed, ready to endure when fighting wasn't enough, ready to continue until the end. Always.